happening. Amazing. And I think we should be live. I can see here Zoom is also telling us we are live streaming on Facebook. So hello and welcome everyone to another Facebook Live. My name is Jana Retief and I will be your host today. I am incredibly excited to have two wonderful women with us today, Dr. Catherine Saenz and Dr. Madison Kackley. Before we start, I would like to take a moment to introduce these incredible women to you. So Dr. Catherine Saenz is an assistant professor of exercise science at the Ohio State University. She is a registered dietitian and is also a certified strength and conditioning specialist from the National Strength and Conditioning Association. She specializes in exercise physiology and nutrition, where her primary focus includes investigating exercise metabolism and metabolic health in athletic populations, women athletes, and underserved communities. Her main areas of research utilize a translational model of benchtop to bedside to study the effects of various exercise and nutrition modalities on health, performance, and recovery, including personalized exercise and nutrition programs, nutritional ketosis and keto-adapted state, and supplement and ergogenic aids. And then Dr. Madison Kackley is a distinguished research scientist, and she leads the She Is Lab. I love the name, by the way, which stands for Scientific Health Empowerment and Integrative Solutions at the Ohio State University. And she is serving as she is a pioneering force in advancing women's health and wellness. Through a multifaceted approach, encompassing nutrition, exercise, and rigorous research, She Is Lab is dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of optimal well-being for women. Dr. Kackley's research delved into the effects of exogenous ketones and ketogenic diets on various physiological outcomes, metabolic health, and cognitive function. Her career is marked by a profound exploration of keto-adapted phenotypes across diverse populations. Noteworthy amongst her recent achievements is a groundbreaking trial demonstrating the potential of specific dietary interventions in restoring menstrual cycles in overweight or obese women. And this discovery has catalyzed further investigation into women's health, addressing issues such as insulin resistance, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and perimenopause. They are here today to share their wisdom with us, and I am really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you, ladies, for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I echo that. I'm really excited to get into this. We often don't get a chance to hone in on this topic area. So this is fantastic. Thank you.
Amazing. I want to actually ask you, maybe for us to start, is it possible that you can decide who wants to go first, but either Madison or Catherine, if you can tell us a little bit more about your personal journey and how you got into your specific field of research and what led you to this?
You, me?
Yeah, let's go alphabetical order. Take it away.
Rude. Kathy's first. Okay, no. Okay, so my journey. Cool. All right, I actually say this to a lot of the students. So my journey, how I got into exercise science, is because I have the inability of sitting still. So we're just going to preface with that. So getting me here for an hour is pretty impressive. But no, so I grew up actually here in Ohio. So I'm at the Ohio State University, but I grew up in Ohio. I probably I guess, compartmentalize myself into a country girl. So I had horses, farms, what have you. And so there was constantly not sitting still. A lot of that going on. When I finished my undergrad, I actually did an internship at the U.S. Air Force Academy. There was an incredible team of mentors there. It was the Human Performance Lab that I was actually kind of sanctioned into. And it was led by Dr. Brenda Buffington, who ended up being here at Ohio State as well, Lieutenant Colonel Zupan. It was just a wonderful team. And so we worked a lot with altitude studies. And that was actually my first bout of research. So my undergrad was a little bit more of the it was, I would say, a teaching school. So we have all of the basic knowledge, but it wasn't in depth when it came to research. So at USAFA, it broadened my horizons, essentially. So we worked with athletes, we worked with cadets, we worked with pilots as well. And so some of the research that I was doing actually led me to Dr. Jeff Bullock, my mentor, some of his literature. And I ended up citing him for a bit. And then when I got back to Ohio, I basically annoyed him via email. It's like, hi, I used to work here. This is what I'm doing now. And I'd like to be a part of your lab. Pretty sure he ignored me like once or twice. And I emailed him again and emailed him again and probably emailed him again. And so finally had a meeting with him and ended up on a really incredible team for grad school, for my master's, and I stayed on for my PhD. And apparently when you get here, you can't leave, as Kathy's going to tell you. And so I've been here working with low carb research. It's moved to a more integrated towards women, and I guess we'll probably discuss that a little bit later, but in my more recent years. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow, that's incredible. You're clearly very passionate about the work that you do.
I do definitely enjoy it. I think it's great to be a voice.
Thanks, Madison. Catherine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's going to be really cool about this session is that Madison and I come from, we both graduated from the same research lab. So I also was one of Jeff's students and also did my master's and PhD through that journey, but we were there at different times. So we overlap and we've got really similar questions that we identified. Like we had this experience where the research studies are very large. And so you're focusing on some big picture components, but with the team being so large, you're also able to hone in on your personalized question. And so we come from similar training, but distinct areas. And so we complement each other so well. And it's made working together now even more awesome. But we didn't overlap in school. So I started my journey, I think similar to Madison. I just love exercise. I actually started school in a totally different area. I was marine bio because I love the ocean and I love water. And I've always loved research. But I notice that you have to spend a lot of time alone. I am very much a people person. And so that quickly switched. And so I knew I wanted to stay in the sciences. I knew I wanted to do something health and medical at the time. And as I started to explore areas, as you do when you're in your studies, I found a research lab that let me volunteer. And so I echo what Madison said, like I very much encourage students or anybody starting to explore their area to really get involved, because it took a few labs to figure it out, but I finally found a place that I had no idea you could study exercise. I had no clue that we could focus in on this topic area and ask questions from very big picture things, like how do we put together an exercise program for a certain population or group, or very specific areas, like exactly what muscle fiber types are doing what are their energy metabolisms, and some questions that stem from that. And so I credit to having these amazing mentors. I went to the University of Maryland, which is one of the schools in the States, and I loved it. I just came from a program that allowed me to get involved and to get a lot of experience. And after that, the one thing about that particular experience is that it was very benchtop. So very, very specific and molecular scientific questions. And as I mentioned, I really like working with people. So I kept exploring that and chasing that. And at the University of Connecticut, they had clinical and translational research labs and very applied settings. So we could still study those specific questions, but expand them out to human settings and to people settings and community settings. And so I was able to apply and I joined that research lab and was there for my master's, which took about two and a half years, and then had the opportunity to continue on for my doctorate studies. During that time, we did transfer labs, but the focus was similar. And I think that's something that's really exciting too. As a researcher, your focus continues to evolve over time. So although I started out wanting to study supplements, so I actually wasn't very involved in low carb research at all. And you'll see that in my background too. I love the supplement work, which Dr. Wolek does quite a bit, although he's very well known for areas in ketogenic diets. And that's such a strong foundation of his scholarship. He also has a very strong sport performance and supplement area. And so his work in creatine and protein supplements was what I was really interested in, and still is an area that I work in. I just love the fact that you can go through such intense exercise or really beat your body up through exercise modalities. And then you can take this nutritional component to help you be bigger, faster, stronger. And that's what I focused on in my master's. For the doctorate, I realized, like, why stop at the supplement when we can look at the whole diet? And that's when I really started to appreciate the nuances to diet manipulation, to exploring carbohydrate restriction, to playing around with different types of fat, to looking at modulating protein levels, really finding the science in the dietary approach. That particular process also took me to a really benchtop area and started doing a lot more work in epigenetics, which I still am involved with and I really, really, really value. But again, I love working with people. So after I graduated, I went the complete opposite way. And I went towards to complete my dietetic portions because I was very exercise science heavy, but I went towards nutrition and then into the pro sports world. And that was very, very different than the research setting, because your job in professional sports is to win and to focus on the team that year. I loved it. I was in professional baseball, but I consulted in some of the other leagues that we've got here in the States and absolutely loved it. It was so much fun. I worked with amazing people. I got to do some really great things. I also speak Spanish, and so it really brought out more of my bilingual side and just very, very collaborative and team-based. But something that you don't get to do in that settings is explore research questions and sort of push that envelope above and beyond what's in your immediate day-to-day. And so that brought me back to the academic setting. I was I've just been in the academic setting, back in the academic setting now for about 5 or 6 years, and had an opportunity to grow my own research lines and find ways to bring in all these topic areas that I've had an experience with and put them together to focus more on women. So much of my work has been in athletics, which tends to be a lot more in men. And so I now have an opportunity to ask, just as Madison said, get to ask those questions in women and find the spectrum of where physiology is and how these external factors start to impact things, and how you can either get people healthier or identify what some of those barriers are to health, or same thing on the performance side, and really, really focus on longevity and just bringing like goodness to people's lives through our research. So it was a long-winded way of saying I study exercise and nutrition, and I've had a lot of fun with it and a lot of great opportunities and met some amazing people. And now I have the chance to continue that in my own journey.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Catherine. It was really just inspiring to listen to both of your kind of journeys and how you ended up where you are today. And I'm sure for me, just to know that you guys are also working very closely with Jeff Volek, it's amazing, it's incredible. He has been part of Prof Noak's own personal journey. As I'm sure you know, the book, The New Atkins, The New You, is the book that actually, made Prof change his stance on, the high carb versus low carb lifestyle. So it feels like we're coming a little bit full circle here. We've got a few people on the live, which is really exciting. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Say hi in the comments. Let us know where you are from. If you have any questions for the ladies here with me, please just pop them in there and we'll get to them. But I wanted to kind of, this is an open question to anyone who wants to answer, but can we talk a little bit about the importance of kind of looking at women, nutrition and exercise versus men? I'm sure, for the longest of time, women were kind of like not very much part of the research sample groups for many, many years. And we're truly only now looking at them as an individual and separately. But can we maybe talk about it? Why is that, and why is that so important?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump on this if you want to hop on after Kathy. So women, I don't want to say that we're governed, but essentially we're governed by our endocrine cycle. And there are, this sounds very archaic, but to say that we were made to reproduce, it's a very blanket way of being as honest as I possibly can. So from the moment of puberty to when we're in menopause or what have you, we are going through this ever-changing cycle. And it's not even just the cycle itself that kind of has implications or influences on both our performance, metabolism, well-being, mood, but it's the phases within the cycle. And what the answers for what those phases are and what they do are either based on a range or based on a multitude of symptoms. And like, if you're not hitting all 10 boxes of these symptoms, you're fine. Well, as a person who has regular menstrual cycles and is in a reproductive status, essentially, going into the doctor and saying like, hey, I saw a change, this lasted a little bit longer, this I felt different this period, or what have you, they have no answers for you. So there are times where performance is detrimented, how you feel, how you eat, when you eat things, how you feel afterwards is detrimented, sleep is detrimented. And for the anomalies of those, basically walking into a general practitioner, they turn around and say, well, this is normal. And it may be, that's fine, but we need more answers than that. So essentially not having this ever-changing flow or ever-changing cycle that we just are expected to see until, you know, death do us part. We need a little bit more information in regards to that. A lot of our stipulations, a lot of our regulations, recommendations are all based on, well, I don't want to say all based because that's very biased of me, but essentially based on a very minute or finite population that's generally men. You'll have some of the female recommendations, and that's great, but there is, even if you don't hit those recommendations as a female, nobody looks at you like you should be emphasizing that more. It's just, I don't want to say back burner, that sounds really bad, but essentially there needs to be more information, more development in regards to women's based specifically on hormones and endocrine cycles, because those things change all of the time. And we shouldn't be pigeonholed into a blanket recommendation when we're so versatile and we're so complex. We need the complexity in our nutrition and our performance as well. So I think delving into this is essentially necessary.
Yes, and I mean, for me as an adult, I only really started to understand my hormonal cycle each month, and being able to understand, for example, how to exercise accordingly to it. And it was one of the most empowering experiences of my life. And for me, thinking like this is not something we teach, you know, young people, and to understand their bodies. It's you know, I mean, I grew up in a time where it was still very much kind of like almost like a shameful experience, you know, having your menses, or, you know, when you've become a woman. And hopefully, because of, you know, women like you and women all around the world, that will change.
No,
Because
absolutely.
it's such
You
an
had to,
important topic.
yeah, they wanted you to sneak to your locker to grab like it. Yeah, I completely understand that. I actually didn't really delve into my own self until trying to conceive my son. And there's so many, I had no idea that this was when I should be trying, or this is what I need to be eating, or any of this. And most of the time you didn't get that from a clinician. You got it from a woman's forum. So general population. So there's so much that needs to be elucidated, but I completely understand. A little late to the game and trying to figure out, you know, me.
Yes, exactly. But thank you so much for that. Yes, Catherine.
Yeah, I think there is so much truth also to the fact, there's that famous quote that women aren't just smaller versions of men. And so it very much shows, even an example like a heart attack in women looks distinctly different. And so many of these events are missed fatally. Like this hits particularly close to home, just because we have taken, and this is true for research, we've explored certain questions and to quite depths, but in similar populations. And so we sort of looked at physiology from this very standard setting. And I'm excited to be part of this era that we're appreciating, and at the point too in science, to find the nuances to different groups and populations, and finding that women are more than half of the population. It's really exciting for us ladies. But there's also an extreme amount of urgency in that as well, because as we're finding, for example, in cardiovascular health, that's the number one killer in women right now across the world. You know, continent is free of that. And it's terrifying. It's hit every single one of us. And the fact that part of that is that there isn't as much information available for preventative areas, for reactionary areas, or for what signs and symptoms are to educate each individual person, that's a big deal. And so having the opportunity to, the awareness to say, hey, we have to take a step back and explore these same questions and identify, are we going to get the same results, or are they going to be distinct? And how do we make sure to be respectful of who is volunteering for these studies and making sure we're doing right by the groups that are interested in this work. I think that's the other component to it. When we're looking at physiology, there's so many specifics to female physiology. So for example, skeletal muscle morphology is distinct, where there's certain like aerobic and anaerobic capacities that have been generalized to male and female. Obviously, people can sit anywhere on that spectrum, but there's some like women-specific signatures in our physiology. And so we can't just use the same model. And I think that's true for not just women, but any other groups and populations, that we very much use a one-size-fits-all in medicine. And unfortunately, like disease rates and health situations are at the point where we can no longer do that. And then when we go to dig into them, we find, oh, there are these differences. There are these areas that we can start to dig into and really make sure that we're personalizing it. So I'm echoing everything that's been said and just adding that research hasn't had the opportunity essentially to identify that as much previously. And now that we're seeing it, I think realizing just the magnitude of differences that might be there, or sometimes that might not be, but socially are addressed very, very differently. And so it's a whole spectrum of work to really chip away for women's health.
Yeah, so Catherine, when it comes to, let's say, the ketogenic diet or low carb diet, is it also right to say that when you prescribe that, or when you, whether you're a man or a woman, when you decide to go on this lifestyle, should it also be approached differently?
Yeah, I love this question. I think this is where the research needs to head. At the moment, it's not. Or if you're in private practice, and for example, I'll do some personal experience. Like in private practice, I'm going to personalize any dietary approach to the individual. And when I'm working with women, I particularly, I'm not in those areas yet, but that's where I'm starting to write proposals and grants, is in menopause, to look into more of the symptomology and where exercise and nutrition might be affecting, or what some of those outcomes might be, or responses that we might be seeing. And so in clinical practice, if you have the opportunity to work one-on-one, yes, you personalize to anybody that you're working with. But on a larger advice, right now, a keto-adapted state is still similarly prescribed to most individuals. And where I really like to have fun is the dietary component, because I do work in athletic populations and I don't always follow that particular setup because it doesn't make sense for those athletes. They might be looking at a higher carb amount, or they might be more sensitive to how exercise affects their ketone levels each day, etc. And so I think we'll start to learn more about how that might affect women. At the moment, I don't know of a research study that's done that particular question, but I can say confidently that I get that question constantly. So that's something that we absolutely need to address. So no, it's not done at a large scale. If you read a research study right now, it still tends to be a similar framework. But yes, I hope we start to explore that, because I wouldn't be surprised if there's certain nuances, and maybe not on the macronutrient side. It might be more on the micronutrient side. And why that affects a carbohydrate restricted state is because if we start to adjust the food sources that are there, then we also just want to make sure that we are keeping in mind and what some of these micronutrients are doing. And so I think a really great example of that are electrolytes, in particular sodium and magnesium. And so how do those particular factors impact your overall diet approach, and how do you feel when you're starting to adapt? Anybody that's carbohydrate restricted knows that there might be some times where you're very much figuring it out. And how do these nuances fit into that? And can we make any recommendations that would say for women, and not just women, but women who are in menopause or in perimenopause, or who might be in like a current active menstrual cycle, where are we fitting in some of these nuances? And that's being done a little bit more on other dietary approaches. I haven't, but nothing set in stone yet. And I haven't seen anything on the low carb side. I don't know if Madison, you have.
I would actually like to say that you are underselling yourself. So, Kathy and one of our great friends and colleagues, Taryn Bedell, they are so great about working with our participants in regards to individualizing that diet. So even on a research spectrum, it may not be in the protocol, but you guys are extremely meticulous when it comes to, okay, well, this isn't working. And in our research, the thing about the ketogenic diet that is so great is that it has a marker of adherence. So like some diets, you're like, okay, am I losing this weight? I don't know if I'm doing this correctly. At least with in ketosis, you know that you're in ketosis, and they are incredible about touching base with participants every day, touching base with the masses every day, and in all populations. And we work with all kinds. So polycystic kidney disease, obviously, women. We're working in that one, military populations, and even in regards to just the situation, so situation specific, so sleep deprivation and what have you, they do a phenomenal job about, okay, that you aren't feeling great, let's work on this. Your ketones are down, let's work on this. So don't undersell yourself. Come on, Kathy. So maybe it's not written in the protocol, but essentially, well, maybe they'll make a manuscript one day that is do all the things that we do, and you'll get some really great adherence and some really great outcomes. So
that's amazing. And I just love, Madison, how you just uplift Catherine, and just, I love women who lift other women up. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I want to quickly go to the comment section. I feel like personally, I have so many questions. I told you guys before we started, like, I've got a lot of questions of my own, but I'm going to set those aside because I see we have some questions coming in from the comment section. So let's have a look and see who's joining us. So Maritza is saying, good afternoon, everyone. Excited about today's live, all the way from Cape Town, South Africa. Henry is saying, hello, Jana, Madison, and Kathy. Mick is joining us from Cape Town. And then Claire is from Cape Town, but living in the UK. And she is saying, I find serious lack of focus of low carb options. The focus is on gluten-free. I'm interested in dealing with post-menopausal weight gain, even on a low carb way of living and regular exercise. So maybe we can chat a little bit about that. There's some interesting comments from Mick, but I'll get to them later. And then Gina has also joined us. So let's dive into the questions. So Mick was saying he's interested to learn more about fueling for long, like 3 hours or longer, trial runs with high intensity.
Yes. First, I want to say hi to all the time zones that are here. So thank you so much for joining. This is really fun. So fueling for a 3-hour high intensity athletic event. It sounds like this is a run. Is it a run, a cycle, a swim? A swim would be. Whew.
Good for you.
Yeah. Both Madison and I are animals.
It is a trail run.
We got floaties of good.
Yeah, so I would say first and foremost, so I'm going to take a step back and say that it does depend on what your common fueling tactics are at the moment. And there's a lot of different foci that you might have during this. So are you looking for, and you don't have to answer these, so we can go through them very quickly, but if you're looking to sustain energy during that time, are you looking to stay as alert as possible? Are you looking to feel like you got fresh legs, essentially, like feel like you're going into it pretty comfortably and not feel as exhausted afterwards? Or is your focus maintaining muscle mass during that time, etc.? So everybody has, or is it as fast as possible, looking at what the goal is of that particular time. And that, I say we can go through them quickly because it probably depends on the training day. So some days you're going to try to push it as much as possible, and other days you're just trying to do for time. So how much can we do during that time, or can we just do the time? And first and foremost, for any fueling aspect, maintaining calories outside of the exercise is huge. And we don't talk about that enough. So do we have enough caloric energy to just sustain the muscle mass that you're trying to keep to be able to do 180 minutes of high intensity exercise or continuous exercise? And then I'd like to also know how often you do that style. Is this like brick training where you'll do some of it in the morning, some in the evenings? Are we doing it all in one block? Are we also incorporating other forms of exercise around that? And so even as I'm talking, you can hear that there's probably a large amount of calories needed around the bout of exercise just to sustain basic metabolic, just basic health. Then from there, if we get to the exercise itself, there's some general recommendations. I will say all the guidelines at the moment are based off of moderate carb diets. So they're not even particularly high carb or low carb or even high protein, which athletes are starting to explore more, even on the aerobic side. And so based on the recommendations, you're typically looking to consume foods, and those portions might look very specific to a moderate carb diet and to a carb dependent individual or more carb reliant individual. And so the recommendations are typically hourly based. But for those that are carb restricted, it might look a bit different. Many of these athletes, it's not unusual to either not fluctuate calories much before the exercise. So what the difference there might be is maybe if you're a moderate carb athlete, you might have a really big meal about 2 to 4 hours before the event. For anecdotally speaking, because this hasn't been researched yet, which are the areas that I'm exploring, athletes that are carb restricted tend not to take in those big bolus of meals that far in advance of their athletic event. They typically will maintain calories and consume more of a normal meal or what they're typically used to before they go into the event. But they're going in with not necessarily in a fasted state. For the research studies that we've done, we do have athletes in a fasted state because of the blood markers that we're looking at. But even we've talked as a research team, that's not realistic when people are going to do their exercise. Now, it makes sense for the research question, but in the practical setting, you tend to want to consume some sort of meal that matches your dietary approach. You might consider increasing carbohydrate a bit at that time, but typically from whole food sources still, where this is very different than a moderate carb diet where you'd be increasing very simple forms of carbohydrate. And then from there, the thing that I really hone in on for carbohydrate restricted or keto adapted athletes is their micronutrient status and their electrolytes. So knowing that in a carbohydrate restricted state, you, especially in the beginning when you're first adapting to it and electrolytes are modulating, heart rate starts to increase. And so if you're using heart rate to measure that performance in any capacity, then it might look a bit higher and you might start to tailor exercise accordingly, when really what you might need is a bolus of electrolytes around that exercise to help manage some of that. Sodium is the most common to be replenished, but it's really nice if you do like one of those electrolyte packets, especially the ones that are low sugar, no sugar, or some of them use some sort of sugar alcohol or something that'll make sure not to spike glucose right at that moment. But if you can take some electrolytes before the exercise and then consume a meal in a comfortable distance from yourself, and it can be a normal sized meal, a typical sized meal, that tends to be an approach that helps you maintain energy. And for those that are keto adapted, they're particularly, I hear of athletes telling me, I'm typically doing this diet because I want to be able to focus throughout the exercise, and their nutritional ketosis state seems to really click in during that time in a way that is very distinct from those that do consume higher carb diets. And so some athletes consume during the exercise, some do not. I think that depends on what the exercise, sort of the setting that's placed. And it's the same thing. I do hear at that point during exercise, they might increase their carbohydrate to some level, something that'll be easy on the stomach and won't affect their gastric emptying rate. So we also don't want anything super high sugar all of a sudden. If you used to do that and all of a sudden you're in a carbohydrate restricted state and you're going to take that bolus, the GI system is not going to be happy. So finding something that's moderate carbohydrate, very simple to consume. It might be in the form of a sports drink or something like that, but small sips, and even that might be diluted just to kind of maintain. And then from there, would be looking at what the recovery options look like. And again, you jump back into your more typical keto-friendly meal. That's one approach to do. I know that actually Dr. Noakes and Dr. Volek were just, I think Dr. Noakes led the publication on glycogen metabolism in keto-adapted athletes. And so there is certainly conversations of, do we even need to modulate carbohydrates around exercise, what that might look like, and what that might look like depending on the training status of the individual, the athletic event itself, and the intensity that athletes are moving towards in that particular event. And so I say all of that to reinforce that personalization piece. So this is more commonly done anecdotally. Research right now tends to be a lot more structured in how we look at long bouts of exercise. You don't typically consume food during, but knowing that realistically during a race, athletes do. And I would say keto-adapted athletes tend to gravitate more towards those electrolytes or micronutrients with some carbohydrate included. But I think that paper and a few others that perhaps inspired that particular publication really challenged that notion of what does glycogen look like during that time, and glycogen being your skeletal muscle energy source during exercise, or one of them, and certainly your quick one that you're going to go through. And so I'd be curious to hear what that person does right now, and if it's working or not, or if they don't do anything and they're sort of looking to start to be more intentional about their nutrition around exercise.
Thank you for that. So Mick, if you heard that answer from Catherine, let us know in the comments section what you're doing. And then maybe if there's time, she can chat to you a little bit more about that. The next question is, I think I briefly read over it now when we said hi to everyone. It's from Claire, and she would like to learn more about postmenopausal weight gain, even on a low-carb way of living and doing regular exercise.
I want to hop on? Okay, well, I'll hop on first, and then since this is your wheelhouse, I'll bat it over to you. So in regards to that, we're being, I guess, governed by this endocrine system. We start at an early age, go through the cycles, pregnancy happens, and all of a sudden all those hormones that you were used to change to different hormones, and then you have the baby, the hormones are gone, and then you do that maybe once or twice and still get back on the cycle, and then all of a sudden everything's gone again, right? And we're back into we're into menopause. I'll give you that brief intro and go back to one of the studies that we conducted. So we were actually looking at hypocaloric diet in both ketogenic diets and low-fat diet. We were doing men and women both. The idea was to give them a calorie deficit, so they were about 75% of their maintenance caloric intake, and then just kind of look at the effects of this. And it ended up being a really great study, found some really cool stuff out of it. But then there was an exploratory measure. One of the things that we do in our lab that's not necessarily female specific, but we had been doing it for a very long time, is just a quick survey, menstrual history survey. In the last 2 weeks, have you seen changes in your period? In the last 2 weeks, have you seen changes in intensity? Have you seen changes in frequency or something along the lines of? When we had published probably 4 papers on that study, went back and looked into the rest of the data that we had left, and we realized that women, and so the woman, or the study population was ages, I want to say it was like 21 to 60 or something like that. It's been such a long time ago. We looked back at these women and we realized that women in the ketogenic diet group had a change in menstrual cycle. Not only was it a change, some of them, there was a few women who hadn't had their period in a while and got really mad at me because it came back, right? And so essentially I was talking with one of my collaborators, Dr. Loriana Soma, and she's in where these women had thought they were already past menopause or in that stage or what have you. They were actually in secondary amenorrhea. So back to my intro paragraph here. Once we get through our cycles, our bodies are so used to this cyclic intervention that it hyper-focuses on reproduction, essentially. When that starts to falter, whether it be due to age, whether it be due to metabolic status. Essentially, we start to lose, I don't want to say lose, our body starts to focus on either trying to regulate or get that back. And I would say stops focusing on metabolism. So basically, our bodies want to reproduce, and then, you know, we can say goodbye, essentially. Doesn't quite work like that. And the age of reproductive health or reproductive status keeps getting, or ends at a younger age and a younger age and a younger age. And I think it's very metabolically influenced. You need the energy, you need a continuous homeostatic metabolism in order to keep this endocrine system up. And when it starts to drop off, the rest of your body's like, well, what do I do now? And I think that that situation or that concern, once women get to the perimenopause, get to menopause, and just past the cycle of reproductive age, their bodies are just like, all right, I'm done here. I don't really know if I have to do much more. And so that weight gain afterwards, since you're not a cycle anymore, it's really hard to get rid of. We see that in a lot of women. We're going to increase body fat. Our body composition isn't going to be as great as it used to be. Bone mineral density tends to decrease. Unfortunately, our body's just like, I'm good. I don't need to do this anymore. I think in terms of ketones versus glucose, being able to utilize glucose, and I'm going to start with the brain and then we'll work around. But in the brain, essentially, it's like glucose is gas in a lawnmower. You have to start the lawnmower before you can use it. That's essentially insulin, right? So insulin's got to be that vehicle that derives glucose where it needs to be. But ketones are dose dependent. So here's my phone. I'm going to put it up next to my wireless charger. Nothing's touching it, but it's dose dependent. So it's just touching the wireless charger and all of a sudden it's charging. I'm not an engineer by any means. I don't know how it works. Pretty sure it's magic, but regardless, that happens. Now we've seen that in the brain. We can see that in the heart as well. Again, another thing that isn't really elucidated in women is that if we're switching over to a ketogenic or a low carb lifestyle, do we see longevity in the endocrine cycle? And does that keeping that going, and I guess increasing what the now standard reproductive healthy age would be, can we see that continuous cycle help to, I guess, immediate or initiate positive responses as we get older, as opposed to kind of hindering, as we would see with higher glucose metabolism and the imbalance of such?
Thank you. I love the way how you explained this in a very understandable manner.
It's really for me. I just got to dumb it down for me.
I just quickly, before we continue, we are, I guess 10 to 8 your time, 10 to 2 our time. Are you guys still okay to go on? Do you have to be anywhere else? So then I know we need to wrap up in about 10 minutes, or can we go on for, let's say, another 20 minutes with the conversation?
I've got about 10 minutes, but I would love to keep the conversation going. And so I say that in the sense that, like, please, I encourage anybody to reach out. Yeah, yes, please invite me back. That'd be awesome.
Next week, same time, same place.
Perfect.
Okay.
But also, please feel free to reach out for anybody that wants to keep the conversation going.
Okay, great. So let's keep on going. Let's see how far we get, and then we'll definitely continue this conversation. The next question, or Catherine, do you want to comment as well?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to talk about the menopause question because, this is so near and dear to my heart. I don't know of a woman that hasn't been told to just eat less at this time and they should lose the weight, and then they do exactly that. And it's a different physiological system. So I think also appreciating the fact that you are probably working incredibly hard to reach whatever place is going to help you feel comfortable. And menopause is just a very special time in life. And truly, we don't have enough research on menopause itself. And we have even less about lifestyle factors that could start to affect it. There is some available work out there, but it is contradictory and it is still finding its nuances. And so to add on to everything that Madison said, one of the major things that does occur as we age is that we're losing muscle mass, and muscle mass is such a metabolically healthy tissue. And this is part of aging. And so the rate that occurs at, and to the extent, certainly is impacted by many, many factors. And there are some people that can try to maintain or nearly maintain muscle mass, but for the large majority of people, you're losing muscle mass at a much earlier stage and throughout the rest of life. And so this is where resistance training is so powerful, and being able to challenge the body to come into an anabolic state. So adding on muscle mass. Now, something special that happens at that time of life naturally is that you become what's being termed as like anabolically resistant. It's much harder to add on muscle mass. That's both biologically driven, but also externally driven. And research shows that as we age, we naturally consume much less protein. And so making sure that protein is a consistent part of the diet. So resistance training and making sure that protein is available at a level that best matches the health status that the individual is in and that the woman is in, but also if you are in a carbohydrate restricted state, finding that level of protein that lets you essentially hit the ceiling without negatively impacting nutritional ketosis. Nutritional ketosis on its own has been found to maintain muscle mass, but the caveat in those studies is that you also have to have the appropriate calories and additional nutritional profile. So if you're in a particularly low calorie diet, which many women are because you're trying to reduce calories to manage weight at times, then that might put you at a state where we now may not be maintaining muscle mass to the same capacity. So finding some way to, and this is where clinical practice can really work on the nuances, but resistance training, absolutely. I don't think that's advertised enough. And heavy resistance training, and the research that's been shown, even for individuals that are in their 80s, 90s, and beyond, heavy resistance training by a relative setting seems to be the best approach to maintaining muscle mass and bone health. Finding enough calories to help with that, and then adjusting the diet accordingly with an emphasis on protein and then nutritional ketosis if that's the approach that the individual is living in. And so, and then also for menopause, there's additional symptoms that will start to play in, and that's where more supplement research is needed. But things like creatine can help maintain muscle mass, and they're doing some really cool things on seeing if creatine could also be included for some symptoms that are felt during menopause. And then on top of that, I'd love to see where a ketogenic diet and creatine could really find some magic. So creatine resistance exercise, nutritional ketosis. I mean, I think there's a lot to explore there.
I have one more thing to add to that. I apologize. When you said resistance training, you're absolutely right. One of the things that we see here when we have women that come in and do body composition testing or just bone mineral density testing, they're like, okay, well, my bone mineral density is decreasing. And that's something that, you know, we see upregulated in menopause or when we're getting to that side as well. I want to champion essentially what Kathy is saying here and completely echo that. Absolutely resistance training, especially when it comes to bone mineral density. What I tell them, and obviously, you know, they're older and they're feeling empowered or want to feel empowered. And not too many people walk out of a body composition scan feeling great about themselves. But I'm like, no, you're awesome. You're a warrior. You're great. We're forging a pathway here for you to be incredible. But do you know what kimberlite is? Anybody here know where kimberlite is? So that is a volcanic rock. And volcanic rock, when you put all of the pressure on it, and this is what I tell them, when you put all of the pressure on it, you do the heavy resistance training, you do the deadlifts, you do the core loading, you're going to make a diamond. And you're a diamond, baby. Let's go. So absolutely on the resistance training, completely echo that. Great input there, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, Catherine, you were talking about the calories and making sure you consume enough calories. I did mention at the beginning that both of you are Nutrition Network lecturers, and your particular lectures on the women's health training. So I really want to encourage anyone that's listening, if you're interested in learning more about this topic, go watch that lecture. It's really interesting. And I think, Catherine, you go into more detail in that lecture on energy availability and the relative energy deficiency syndrome, which I found very, very interesting, because it's so true. Often as women, we tend to just think, you know, I should just eat less and exercise more and I'll be fine. But that's obviously not the case. And I'm going to squeeze in one last question before we say goodbye. And this question is actually from Maritza. And she's saying, hi there, I'm a 41-year-old female and hitting the gym hard with 45-minute heavy weight sessions, including 160 kilogram squats once daily, plus functional training in the afternoon. But I'm feeling like my macros and calorie counts might be off. Any advice on fine-tuning my nutrition for this intense routine and my age? I also fast 8:16 daily.
Thanks for the question. And also, can I be your training partner? That sounds amazing. So let's start there.
You.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways to test where your energy balance may be. But first and foremost, if you're feeling like it's off, then tune into that. And what's really interesting about energy is that, and when I mean energy, I mean like caloric intake and having that sustained physiology. What's interesting about that is it starts to sneak up in really wild ways. So there's some common ones, like people will feel fatigued, they'll feel maybe brain fog, or sort of like you're dragging, especially in the afternoon. But there's some other components that might be affected, particularly gut microbiome, decision making, skin and integrity, sleep, and then certainly recovery. So if we're going to hone in on that portion, if you're finding that recovery is starting to slow down, or you're just not as fresh for the next time that you're going into your workout, then finding ways to first address caloric intake. And in the lecture, thanks so much for sharing the lecture. In the lecture, we go into more the paradigm that's being studied with REDS. And this is one of my primary areas of research. This is where I tend to publish a bit more, collaborate on when it comes to athletics, and especially when I'm working with female athletes. Because it's not intuitive on how much you have to eat when you're exercising that much. And there haven't been great recommendations to say that have been female specific. Usually it's very blanketed, like 5 to 7 kcals per certain amounts of exercise, etc. If we're doing some math on the dietetic side or on any of the programming side, where calories are actually can be quite impacted at that time. And again, I keep harping on those micronutrients, but because I think we need to really find value in the fact that your macronutrients are your energy. And so we need to have enough energy to support the system, but you need the nuts and bolts of that process as well. And that's where your micronutrients come in. And so if you're low on total energy, that means you're also low in nuts and bolts. And that means the system will fall apart. I mean, you literally can't keep it together. And so things like your vitamin B12, your iron, your electrolytes, which are charging things, all of that is also low when our calories are low. And what's really interesting about REDS is that in much of the research that we found, it's not intentional. You're not intentionally dropping calories. You just are intentionally increasing activity. And so when you're increasing activity, there's some really great research that's been done where this was for women, I believe in the Army, but it was a military tactical athletes. What they found was that during basic training, many women were starting to lose their menstrual cycle. They were losing their periods. And all they did was add in 1 protein shake a day, 1. So that added additional calories, additional nutrient-dense options, and then some micronutrients all in that 1 shake. And they found that several of the women were able to find their menstrual cycle, not just come back, but regulate once again. And so just energy makes such an immediate impact. And then from there, we can modulate what that energy looks like. So I'm being strategically blanketed in that statement, in the sense that I personally like to be very detailed about how we approach the diet. So rather than saying, add in X or Y or Z, instead I'd encourage you to identify some of those symptoms and see if you're matching up with some of those identified symptoms that are in the REDS paradigm. And if so, first and foremost, just finding ways to increase calories. Sometimes that feels really uncomfortable. And I very much get that. I work with several, especially weight sensitive sports. So if you're not sure how to increase calories, some way that could be helpful, like I said, is just 1 protein shake or 1 supplement, safe supplement source that can add in. But you can also just increase a slight amount throughout the day. So maybe it's a little bit more oil, or a little bit more of a particular type of food that's going to add a couple hundred calories to it. So 100 to 300 calories, and see how that goes. And if you're finding that's moving you in the direction you're not looking to go. So again, I work in weight sensitive sports. So we need to both find the energy that they need at the weight class that they're looking for. Or I work in aesthetic sports, like I work with dancers and artistic athletes. So if that's moving you towards the section where it's not aiding in that athletic event, then can we be more strategic about the profile of the nutrients themselves? So trying to be as nutrient dense as possible and find the profile that fits, but you also need the right amount of calories. Like there comes a point where you just cannot balance those and maintain the goals that you're looking for, especially for someone that's lifting that heavy several times a week and consistent. It sounds like that's been going. I mean, I would assume it's a great training age, well adapted to the exercise. Now we need to find ways to modulate nutrition around it. And the last comment I'll make is that perhaps it's modulating calories the days that are being taxed to that level. So recovery is certainly an incredible, a very important aspect, but maybe you're not increasing calories as much during recovery. You're being more strategic about nutrient style. And then the days that you're exercising a lot heavier, that's where we bump up some of the calories. So there's a couple ways to do it. You can do total calories throughout the week. You can increase calories around that exercise itself, or you can find more fine tuning on what symptoms are starting to come out and where you feel like you might be off. Especially, as I mentioned, you're going to feel it in the gut if things are off. And from there, start to modulate what those nutrients might be. And I, in private practice, like to hone in on some of those micronutrients because that's where we tend to fall off. We're so focused on total calories, then we also fail to realize that we're losing essential nutrients for us to function, especially at that high level.
Thank you, Catherine. Is there anything you want to add, Madison?
No, you absolutely hit it all.
Amazing. So thank you so much for joining us today. I am feeling truly inspired, excited to know there are researchers like you doing the much needed research in the areas that's still lacking. We will definitely invite you back. We didn't get to all the questions from the audience. But before we say goodbye, maybe you could just tell us where can our audience members find you or learn more about your work if they're interested, maybe to contact you. How can they reach out?
Yeah, I'll jump on this. So I want to say that we are a pillar essentially of a keto collaborative here at OSU, and it expands past OSU, but we have an incredible onset of scientists that are here. Obviously, Jeff Volek, Taryn Bedell, Orlando Simonetti, Scott Hayes, Josh Hagan, all of these people are essentially working with Catherine and I on just opening up this question about low carbohydrate application into different populations, but elucidating those answers as well. So if there's anything that you guys on the live here that are interested in finding out, I guarantee that if you find OSU and throw a stone, somebody here will be doing research on that. So stay tuned. But we have the low carb USA, low carb OSU. Not USA, don't come after me, Dom Dioxtio, but the low carb OSU website, the She Is Laboratories at OSU. We also have, beginning our social media, we're kind of archaic in terms of, I guess, media. I'm working with some grad students and some undergrads who are helping us with the social media component of it. But otherwise, yeah, you can find both Catherine and I's profiles at osu.edu, and you'll see us in collaborations globally. So any other questions to us, though, feel free to send us an email, or you'll be able to find our profile, our contact information on the OSU website.
Yeah, I threw my email in the chat and that can be shared. I absolutely love to connect with people. And all these questions that are asked, I feel like we have so much going on in the research world, but these questions are so foundational. We're like, we're not there yet, but I promise we're working on them, or let's collaborate on it, or let's team up, or if that work is being conducted elsewhere, then even more, I'd want to connect with that person. I want to learn. So please reach out. this is such an honor to be here. I mean, there's people doing such amazing work. So I really appreciate the chance to get to share some of the things we're doing, but also humbly just excited about all the trailblazing that occurred before us. So I had amazing mentors, have amazing mentors that are so easy to reach out to, have incredible collaborators. And I've been that person that has reached out when people have done things like this, and people have been unreal with their time and their expertise. So please reach out. I'd love to continue the conversation and just want to say thank you, because this is really cool. Madison and I usually start our days a little bit differently than getting a chance to have fun chats on this type of work. Usually this comes at the end of the research study. So this is awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
But yeah, thank you for the foundation. We appreciate you guys.
Thank you. I tell you, we will definitely have you back here. I feel like there's still so much to unpack. Absolutely. So thank you also to our audience members for joining us today. Like, if you have any more questions you would like for us to keep for the next live, because we will have them back, pop them in the comment section, and our media team will also share the details that was just mentioned in the comment section if you want to reach out to Madison or Catherine. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon or a lovely morning or a lovely evening or day or wherever you might find yourself. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.